Hello and welcome to the Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, Mali at 60, 4 coups since 1968 and still constitutional and political turmoil. What does the future hold for this troubled West African Sahel country after the latest military takeover and the continuing ravages of a withering jihadist insurgency? We'll look back at the last 6 decades of Mali's turbulent history and look forward to what many see as its uncertain future. And later, the Catholic pontiff versus the deadly mafia. Pope Francis launches an unprecedented attack on mobsters from the notorious Italian criminal organization, who he says are exploiting the Virgin Mary and using her to whitewash their dark underworld image. So, can the church stand up to one of the most powerful and implacably lethal organized crime groups in the world? We'll speak to the CEO of Catholic Voices, the media arm of the official Catholic Church. Coming up. Now, this week, Mali commemorates the 60th anniversary of its independence from France in the midst of considerable political turmoil. That's par for the course, of course, with 4 coups since 1968 and the country's latest civilian democratically elected president, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, toppled by the military just a month ago after mass protests against his rule. The new interim president is Ba Ndour, a former soldier. Military coups seem to have become a habit in Mali. 52 years ago, President Modibo Keïta was overthrown by former military leader Moussa Traoré, who himself lost power by the same means in 1991. And now another coup just over a month ago, the second in the past decade.
On Monday, September 21st, 2020, the college appointed the people who will be the president and vice president of the transition to ensure the implementation of the roadmap for the transition. The president of the transition in Mali will be Ba Ndour, and the vice president of the transition will be Colonel Assimi Goïta. The swearing-in ceremony will take place on Friday, September 25th, 2020.
Well, to assess Mali's independence in the midst of political turmoil and a jihadist insurgency, I'm joined now by the international security and political analyst Chidi Nwanu. Thank you very much indeed, Chidi. I hope you've got your breath there. I understand you were racing from your car to your computer. But thank you very much indeed for joining us. So just a month ago, a midnight presidential resignation and Mali's second coup in 10 years announced. Looking back now, was there justification for that coup?
Well, good afternoon, and once again, thank you for having me. I think justification would be a fairly difficult phrase to use. I think we'd more be looking at whether there was a sufficient cause, and whether the effect is justified. So the cause of the coup obviously was the breakdown in governance in terms of Mali civilian or an elected government. There were several factors in that. The first and the most important, obviously, is the coup. Is the conflict, or now the various conflicts, because there's more. You could say there's more than 1 or 2 conflicts going on in Mali. Not just the jihadi problem, but also the problem with the Tuareg, the everlasting problem with the Tuaregs, and also the communal crisis is going on between the different ethnic groups. So the government was clearly mishandling this. But in contrast to some other African countries, there had been a bit of responsiveness, but still there hadn't been the kind of response that the Malian people wanted. So a government had resigned, but following on from this, the political elite, continued behaving as if all was normal. And I think the straw that broke the camel's back was, the last election with the president's son and several allies being elected as members of parliaments with, very questionable elections. So there was significant cause. Whether it was justified is, a fairly tenuous argument, but there was sufficient cause for the military to step in, or for at least some actors within the country to step in.
The problem, of course, is that military coups seem to have become a habit in Mali, because, 52 years ago, as we mentioned in the intro, President Modibo Keïta made some rather unpopular decisions which led to his overthrow by former Mali military leader Moussa Traoré, who himself lost power by the same means in 1991. His legacy of the single-party state ended by disgruntled soldiers after 13 years. And now another coup just over a month ago, second in a decade. I mean, not the best memory to have, as sort of Mali marks 60 years of independence this week, is it?
Well, this is exactly the thing, and this is why I was hesitant with the phrase justified, or just because this is part of Mali's history in that you have a president, and then you have a coup, and then there's a period of peace, and then there's another coup. And so the most important thing here were the underlying factors. What caused these coups? Why are these things persisting? Why is it that the Malian, kind of political elite do not have any kind of safety mechanisms, any fallback in which they can resolve their issues without it getting to the point where the military steps in? And the military generally steps in as an autonomous actor. They don't step in on behalf of X or on behalf of Y. They step in essentially to put the elite in their place, and then become part of the elite, and then we start the cycle all over again.
Meanwhile, of course, Chidi, an insurgency raging in the Sahel. I mean, how much does this coup and the ensuing political insecurity and instability raise serious doubts about the ability of the current interim authorities to effectively contribute to the fight against jihadism in the country, either through dialogue or military force?
So again, this is actually one of the more fascinating elements of this situation, in that Mali, as I said, is currently having 3 or 4 different conflicts. So right now, the Tuareg issue, is there, the jihadi issue, and there's several jihadi groups, and then the community's ethnic crises. But what's fascinating, and then the actors involved are again multi-dimensional. You've got the EU training, you've got the French doing their autonomous mission with Barkhane, you've got takeover coming in, which is a kind of European special forces operation. You've got the United Nations. You've got so many different armed actors, and yet none of them skipped a beat or missed a beat. with the coup, everything just continued, as it was. And this kind of tells you several things. It shows you that, number one, Mali is really, or the Malian government or the Malian state, is really not a serious player within its own security sector. All the other actors were able to continue. There was no breakdown in, communication. Nobody stopped their operations. It was just carry on. There was no kind of worry. The fellow himself, Goita, who's taken Colonel Goita, has gone through various training courses with, almost all the actors there, and, has been in combat, with the different groups, for quite a long time. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that the Malian state in of itself no longer has, a monopoly or never really had a monopoly of force. And that lack of monopoly of force is now kind of priced into the bargain. So the state of the war does not depend on the Malian state. It depends very much on all the other actors.
But I'm wondering what, I understand the point you're making, but surely there must be a knock-on effect if the central government is, or at least the institutions of government are unstable.
Yes, there will definitely be a knock-on effect. So the mantra of the Western powers now is through, by, with. So they've got to work through the local actor, with the local actor, and by the local actor, by their consent and by their will. And with that local actor now being in essence in a legitimate state, there is a huge crisis of legitimacy. So, whilst I'm not directly involved in, in anything pertaining to Mali, I'm aware of how, the various legal people will be running around trying to find, legal justifications. Because if you're operating, for example, as the French or other countries are, at the invitation of the Malian government, and the Malian government has been overthrown, then it automatically means that, by definition, all your actions are illegal because that government no longer exists, or you're operating with an illegal government. So there's going to be a lot of kind of legal gymnastics going on in the background. But in the grand scheme of things, on the ground, the Malian forces will still continue holding their positions. But, the main fight is being conducted by actors who are not necessarily controlled by the Malian state.
And beyond your sort of analysis of the security situation, I mean, you are also a risk assessor, and therefore you take into account the political ramifications of the instability in Mali. I mean, what is your take right now? What do you advise people to do with regard to Mali? I mean, you've got ECOWAS intervening to some extent. There's sort of deadlines given and so on, and we've now had a new interim president announced who is a former soldier. What does that tell you in terms of the direction of democracy and as far as the future of the country is concerned?
Well, there's several factors in that, and I mean the most important thing is an investor or anybody looking into a new territory is looking for stability. You're looking for continuity. You're looking to see that there's several factors. The first is you want to make sure that whatever it is that you go into is what you're going to see when you get there. So if someone says you can come in and you've got rule of law, freedom of movement, etc., you want that continuity throughout your stay there. So that stability is going to be key, and the fact that this coup is broadly popular with the local people. There hasn't been, kind of pockets of resistance. It can be reassuring to people who are looking at Mali. But conversely, Mali is now being sanctioned by, its fellow West African states, and almost as importantly, is being sanctioned. Those sanctions extend to the CFA region. So for anybody looking at this as either from an investment point of view, you've got to worry about how are you going to extract your funds, how are you going to be able to get parts in or get things out, and all of those things increase massively your risk of doing business.
So, I mean, looking at the overall picture, we've got just under 2 minutes. Is it fair to say that 60 years after independence, there's really nothing to celebrate in Mali, and the future of the country remains, to say the least, uncertain?
I think he could definitely say that the future remains uncertain. It's going to be. I don't think there's many African countries who, after 60 years, have much to celebrate. But Mali, in its case, has gone from a fairly. It was actually one of the celebrated, kind of democratic showpieces in Africa, or West Africa in particular, and it's really fallen quite far down. Culturally, it's lost a lot of its treasures. The books and the libraries of Timbuktu, all the shrines, the Sufi shrines, and before it used to at least have that cultural aspect where it had a great kind of offbeat music and arts and culture. A lot of festivals, but all of that's gone now. It's very insecure. It's struggling with investment. Its political elite are, just as corrupt and venal as before, and it obviously has the issue of narco trafficking and a lot of other issues. So the future is definitely uncertain, and there is going to be a lot of question marks as to whether this interim government can actually build upon its whatever its popularity to a greater to a transitional government that will lead to democracy and a more stable and accountable democracy.
Chidi, thank you very much indeed. Chidi Nwanu is the international security and political analyst there, talking to me about Mali. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about Mali at 60, with 4 coups since 1968 and still mired in political turmoil and insecurity. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniegolu. Now, Mali is this week marking 60 years of independence from France. And just a month after the latest coup in the country, and with the fight against the jihadists continuing, how fragile are things looking in the Sahel country? The final shape of Mali's promised transition to new elections is yet to be settled several weeks after soldiers seized power in Bamako, forcing President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta to resign, although former Defense Minister Barton Dor has been named as interim leader. The country's military rulers are hoping this will satisfy fellow members of the regional bloc of West African countries known as ECOWAS to accept its plan after weekend talks to reassure opposition skeptics. Meanwhile, thousands of international troops remain deployed in Mali to tackle a withering insurgency that's now at least a decade old, a security crisis that sees northern Mali continuing to suffer jihadist attacks, while central areas are scarred by intercommunal tensions and violence.
We have organized this demonstration to continue the process we have started to remove the French criminal policy out of Malian territory.
Bring France out is not a small matter. But to succeed, we must be united. We must evolve together. If at the same time that some Malians are killed or the Malians are celebrating, it benefits France, we should have good days ahead.
It is a message of sacred union around Mali. I ask the Malian people to support the armed forces of defense and security. Today is an opportunity for me to congratulate them for all their efforts to bring security and peace to Mali.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by the International Security and Development Analyst, David Otto. Great to see you, David, and thank you very much indeed for joining us. What's your assessment of the current situation in Mali as the country marks 60 years of independence this week?
Of course, Charles, I don't think Mali would actually be seeing itself as an independent state, at this point in time, because as the previous speaker had made it very clear, there are various external parties that are actually in the background controlling most of the situations, the political situation, and the internal dynamics of the Malian government. Of course, I don't know if one could call it a government because we're still talking about a somewhat position of a junta. Of course, we also know that they've appointed a former colonel to become the next president for the transition period. But 60 years, I doubt if the Malians will be looking at this as a time of celebration. But also, I think 60 years for a country is not enough to actually see any kind of political progress. Especially when you're talking about African states. They're fairly new states, but the complexity in Mali is one that requires Malians themselves to accept responsibility. And but the presence of so many international parties, will really be a serious ramification, and hopefully the transition government and the next government that is democratically elected will be able to begin again the process of rebuilding the confidence that has been lacking between the people and the previous administration.
Well, I mean, beyond a general hope that we all share that things will pan out well in Mali, do you see anything in the current political situation that offers an opportunity for the country to now properly deal with its challenges?
One of the biggest challenges that the Malians are facing now is this coup d'etat, which was organized successfully by the CNSP, the National Committee for the Salvation of the Malians, and of course there is one thing with organizing the coup successfully. There is also another thing in terms of how you can take power and control it. So I think what the junta faces at the moment is to be able to turn the success of the coup into a democratic system. And, mind you, this is a country that, most often the government has been relying on the same military to suppress, the population whenever they, go to the streets to protest. So I believe that, it's also going to be a problem for the population to be able to guarantee that there is going to be a smooth transition period whereby whoever is going to be in charge, who is going to be elected, will be able to deliver whatever the population has been vying for. One of the reasons why the people were protesting before the August coup d'etat was that they were complaining about the ineffectiveness of the military in dealing with the jihadists in the north. And so if the military has taken over power now, they've got to be able to show that they can deal with that problem in the north. But I doubt, because now the focus of the military is to be able to consolidate power in Bamako, rather than looking at the jihadist activities in the northern part of the country. So there is a huge challenge, Charles, which I believe one needs to watch very closely.
I think I broadly agree with your analysis there. The problem, of course, David, is that this latest coup, I mean, as you said, appears to have been a military reaction to, security problems, corruption, disputed elections, mass protests. I mean, but to others in the sub-region, certainly people that I've talked to in leadership in ECOWAS, I mean, it just sounds like the same sort of excuse that soldiers give, when they want to intervene and seize power for themselves.
I mean, two wrongs don't make a right, Charles. The system, the constitutional system, demands that the people have the voice. If the people elect a government, of course, the definition of the people can be disputed. But if the people, elect a government, and the same people come and go on the streets and demand that the government should step down, if the government doesn't step down or doesn't respond to the issues that have been raised, then that is also an infringement to the constitution. And what we've seen in the case of Mali is a constitution that has also been overthrown. So, of course, as the ECOWAS has said, and many other international organizations, have made it very clear that, they condemn the overthrow of the former president Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta by the military junta. But at the same time, one needs to ask, which comes first? Is it the constitutional coup by the previous government for refusing to, one, step down, but number two, address the issues? Or is it the coup d'etat which was organized by the military junta? So you've got to look at the long-term balance. For the military, they're saying, the junta, they're saying that they took away the president because he was no longer wanted by the people. So it's trying to balance between what the military is saying and what they're actually going to do. Now the question is, can they do the things which the president had failed to do? And if they can't do that, then the answer is very straightforward, that it's two wrongs making no right for the Malians at the moment.
And those are very good points you raised there, David. The point, of course, is that this is the second coup in Mali in less than 10 years. I mean, does that make it more worrisome and suggest that the country is on the wrong trajectory with a very sort of unstable politics? I mean, we've got less than a minute to go.
The Liptako-Goma region, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, they are very susceptible to coups. And, and this is one of the biggest problems, because even the military junta that is holding power now is worried that there could be a counter coup. And, you've got the same, a situation where the constitution, has been kind of, breached in Ivory Coast and other African countries. So I think the important thing is to bear in mind that, the people must, take control of this.
David, I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but we've got to go. David Otto is an international security analyst. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including the Pope versus the Mafia. The Vatican clashes with the notorious criminal organization over the use of the image of the Virgin Mary. Stay with us.